What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode. Today is a super exciting one. You want to know why? The engine is going back in the engine bay for the Mini. So we've put a lot of money, we spent a lot of time, and a lot of effort has gone into this so that I can make this Mini an absolute monster. Today is the last day with the engine out of the engine bay. We did a whole bunch of stuff to this thing. We refreshed the entire engine, the cylinder head, and the transmission. We refreshed all the external peripheral components on the car, and we're making it so that this thing is bulletproof. I don't want to have to remove this engine bay again, so I wanted to do it once and do it right. And as you guys can tell, it looks killer. So today's the day. The engine is going back in. I have everything lined up, lines, the hoses, everything in the engine bay should be pretty much ready to go. The engine is going to be putting in sideways, same orientation it came out, and we're going to be able to hopefully get this Mini up and running super soon. My deadline is basically here, and I need to get this thing up and going. So, without further ado, let's get working on this thing. Reinstalling the engine with someone else is super handy. If you can have someone else to help you guide and align the engine into the engine bay, it's going to make the install so much easier. Now, I raised the engine up so that I had enough clearance and it would fit in the engine bay. I then put the transmission side in first. This allowed me to guide it into place and then swing the engine around. Then at that point, I could lower the top so that it would slide over top of the engine mount, and then I could bolt everything up. Now, following that, you want to make sure you bolt everything up to the manufacturer's spec. So if there's any nuts or any bolts, you need to torque those. Any torque spec that you'll see in this video is going to be found in the description box of this video. So be sure to check that out if you guys are doing this build. Take your time with putting the engine back in the engine bay, because if you guys hurry this up or you're not necessarily careful, you do indeed have the possibility of breaking something. If you guys are negligent now, that is definitely going to cost you quite a bit should you break any kind of component, whether it be a tube, whether it be an alternator, or whatever it is. It's going to cost you a decent amount, so just take your time and be careful. Haha! So now with the engine in the engine bay, it's pretty much just a matter of putting all the extra stuff on the car. So I couldn't go ahead and install the intake manifold yet, only because there wasn't a lot of space in between the engine and the firewall. So now that it's in place, now that the engine isn't moving, I can put all that stuff on there and get started with putting this Mini back together. Now, luckily, I have the front of the vehicle removed from the car, so I don't have the rad or the front bumper support attached to it. So it should give me a lot more room to work with the intake and exhaust side of the engine. So I need to put the intake manifold, all the intake stuff, all the intercooler piping, the intercooler, the exhaust system, the downpipe, the turbo, and the exhaust manifold. All of that stuff needs to go on before I can put the front clip back on the car. But there isn't too much more that needs to be done to get this thing up and running. So let's get to work. This here is the torque mount that prevents the engine from rocking forwards and backwards under load. You can see here that I've also installed a polyurethane insert in it to make it stiffer. Install it underneath the engine, between the engine and the subframe, and secure it in place with the 2 bolts. On the back side of the engine, we're going to install the water pipe that is sandwiched between the coolant pump and the thermostat housing. This allows the coolant to go from the thermostat housing to the coolant pump. The thermostat housing is held into place by 3 hex bolts. Be sure to torque those up to the manufacturer spec. Next up on the reassembly, we're going to begin by installing some of these exhaust components onto the engine. So we're going to begin over here on the left. We have the exhaust manifold gasket. We have new hardware for the exhaust manifold. I have the exhaust manifold that is ceramic coated along with the brackets that surround the perimeter of it. I have new hardware and new gaskets connecting the turbocharger up to the manifold, followed by the bracket that supports the weight of the turbocharger. Now between the turbo and the downpipe, we have more gaskets and more hardware. So we're going to have a bunch of stuff that needs to go in. It is all pretty straightforward. We're pretty much on the last part of the install. So there's not much else that needs to be installed on this Mini motor before we can get it going. So let's begin by first installing the studs that mount to the cylinder head. I'm going to be installing each one of the studs onto the cylinder head first. There's going to be 10 of them. I'm going to be using a hex bit that goes inside each one of the studs, and you want to just tighten and snug each one of those studs up to the cylinder head. Following that, you can go ahead and install the exhaust manifold gasket on top of each one of those studs. The turbocharger and the exhaust manifold need to be bolted up together before they can go ahead and be installed on the engine. I bought all new hardware for this new turbo, so installing all this is going to be a breeze. Right here, there are 4 studs that have a Torx head on them that need to be tightened and bolted onto the hot side of the turbo. Snug them into place. Following that, you'll need a new gasket so that you don't have a leak between the exhaust manifold and the turbo. Simply press it onto the embossment on the turbo. Last but not least, tighten the nuts down to secure both components into place. Now be sure to torque those also up to spec. Now, as for installing the turbocharger and the manifold, there's going to be 3 additional brackets that distribute the pressure of the manifold onto the head. Using the Mamba stainless fasteners, bolt the 3 brackets up to the studs on the cylinder head. Tighten all 10 of them up to the manufacturer's spec. This next bracket that you're seeing right here connects the turbocharger to the engine block. It supports the weight of it. Install it and torque those 2 bolts down. With the exhaust manifold and turbocharger now braced up and mounted to the engine, we now can go ahead and install the peripheral components to the exhaust side of the turbo, so the hot side. So we can install the downpipe along with the gaskets here, along with the studs that are required to mount it all. And then down here, we're going to be needing to install 2 brackets that mount to the block that support the downpipe itself. So it prevents it from moving this way and even in and out. So we're gonna have to do all that to get this thing up and going. As for installing the downpipe, in the Mamba fastener kit, you'll have an extra 2 studs and nuts that you'll use to secure the downpipe brackets up to the engine block. These here are designed to keep the downpipe in place and prevent it from moving under load. If it does move and you don't have these brackets secured onto the block, what might happen is you might snap one of the studs on the turbocharger itself. Now, if you can prevent that from happening, I would say definitely do that. Install the 3 new studs onto the turbocharger, followed by your new gasket. When installing the downpipe, be sure to slide it over the lower brackets and then guide it over top of the studs on the turbo. Follow it up by securing the 3 hex nuts onto the studs. Torque all 3 nuts to the manufacturer's spec, followed by both the bolts and the brackets on the bottom side of the downpipe. Okay guys, so we're making some pretty good progress. Next up, I have the cooling stuff going to and from the turbocharger. So I have the coolant lines and the oil lines. Now, the one thing about this kit is that this is an upgraded kit. Now, I'm not sure if you can purchase this kit anymore, but I'm gonna link something that's similar to it in the description box. I bought this a while ago. This is an upgraded hose line so that you're hopefully never gonna have to replace the lines on your car again. These are fully banjo, stainless steel, really nice fitting. But this is unfortunately where this video is going to stop, only because I am missing 2 parts. There's one component that I was hoping to get today. It's leading from the auxiliary coolant pump up to the coolant lines. Now, I don't have that piece, and the next piece that I don't have that I need so that I can start the car, it's the pipe that's going from the intake to the turbocharger. So because this is a bigger turbo, I didn't expect that I needed a different intake pipe. Turns out I do, it doesn't fit. My deliveries app is telling me that I have this part coming in and it's supposed to be delivered on Saturday. So fingers crossed, if everything works as it should, I should have this car up and running probably Saturday afternoon. So I need to go to the States, pick it up, and then come back home. But we're making some great progress. If you guys have any questions regarding this video, comment section's down there. Do you guys think we're gonna be able to make this thing run for Saturday? I really hope we can. Anyways guys, if you have any further questions, comment section's down there. You know what to do. Thanks for watching guys. See ya.